In the bustling port city of Tianjin, China is pulling out all the stops this weekend, hosting a gathering of world leaders that feels like a bold statement against the West. Chinese President Xi Jinping is welcoming a mix of allies and rivals, including Russian President Vladimir Putin, who's still fighting a brutal war in Ukraine, and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, leader of the world's largest democracy. This two-day summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization (SCO) starts on Sunday, September 1, 2025, and it's all about showing Beijing as a steady force in a world shaken by chaos. With autocrats, populists, friends, and even foes rubbing shoulders, the event highlights how Xi and Putin are pushing to shift global power away from Western groups like NATO or the G7. Meanwhile, back in Washington, President Donald Trump's aggressive moves, like slapping huge tariffs on China, Russia, and even India, are stirring up global relations, making America's allies nervous and driving some countries closer to Beijing's orbit. This summit isn't just talk, it's a sign of changing alliances that could cost the U.S. big in influence, trade, and security. Key points from the summit kick off with Xi's warm welcomes. Putin arrived amid tight security, fresh from deflecting blame for the Ukraine conflict onto the West during his remarks. Modi, representing India's massive economy and population, is here to balance ties with Russia and China while dealing with border tensions. Other leaders include Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian, who's new on the job and eager for economic deals, plus heads from Central Asian nations like Kazakhstan and Pakistan. The SCO, which started as a way to handle border issues back in 2001, now has 10 members and covers nearly half the world's people. This year's agenda focuses on beefing up security against terrorism, boosting trade without relying on the US dollar, and even teaming up on AI tech. Xi called for rejecting a Cold War mentality in his opening speech, urging cooperation instead of confrontation. Putin echoed that, praising China's role in possible Ukraine peace talks, while Modi stressed India's pain from decades of terrorism. 33 leaders are set to sign a Tianjin Declaration and a 10-year plan for growth, including ideas for an SCO bank to fund projects without Western loans. 28. But let's zoom out to see why this matters so much right now. The world is in flux, and Trump's return to the White House in January 2025 has turned things upside down. After winning the 2024 election, Trump wasted no time slapping 50% tariffs on goods from India, on top of even higher ones for China and Russia. He says it's to bring jobs back home and punish unfair trade, but critics call it reckless. 13. For America, these moves aim to protect interests like manufacturing and tech dominance, but they're backfiring. India's economy, a key U.S. partner in countering China, is getting hit hard. Think higher costs for U.S. consumers on everything from spices to software services. Modi, who's been cozy with the U.S. through deals like the Quad Alliance, now finds himself at the SCO table, chatting with Xi about easing border disputes. 20. That's a loss for America. India was supposed to be a bulwark against Chinese influence in Asia, but Trump's tariffs are pushing New Delhi to hedge its bets, strengthening ties with Beijing and Moscow instead. Picture the scene in Tianjin. Red carpets unrolled along the high river, massive banners waving in the breeze, and military parades showcasing China's might. Xi, dressed in his signature dark suit, shakes hands with Putin, who's looking stern but satisfied after Russia's recent gains in Ukraine. Modi, in his traditional kurta, smiles for the cameras but keeps a watchful eye. India and China have clashed over borders, yet here they are, discussing peace. The summit's vibe is one of unity against outside threats, with talks on everything from fighting cyber attacks to sharing AI tech without U.S. restrictions. 19 over 20 leaders are here, including UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who's pushing for global cooperation amid wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. 34. It's a far cry from the divided G20 meetings or US-led summits where arguments often steal the show. For the US, this SCO gathering stings because it directly challenges American interests. Washington has long seen the SCO as a rival bloc, one that could undermine NATO in Eurasia or weaken US sanctions on Russia and Iran. 22. With Putin waging war in Europe, his presence here, hosted by Xi, shows how China is providing a lifeline to Russia through oil deals and tech swaps, bypassing U.S. penalties. America's loss: billions in ineffective sanctions, as Russia's economy holds steady thanks to Chinese support. Trump's approach, which includes pulling back from global deals like the Paris Climate Accord again and threatening NATO allies, is making the U.S. look unreliable. 26 allies like India are drifting, worried about Trump's America First tariffs that could spark a trade war. U.S. businesses are already feeling the pinch. Higher costs from retaliatory tariffs mean lost markets in Asia, where SCO countries are now prioritizing deals among themselves. Let's dive deeper into the players. Xi Jinping, China's strongman leader, is using this summit to cement his vision of a community with a shared future. At 72, Xi has ruled for over a decade, building the Belt and Road Initiative to connect Asia with Chinese cash. Hosting in Tianjin, a city of 15 million known for its ports and tech hubs, lets him show off China's progress. In his speech, Xi pushed for an SCO development bank, which could loan money for infrastructure without the strings attached to World Bank funds, strings often tied to U.S. demands for human rights or democracy. 5 for America, that's a direct hit. The U.S. loses leverage in shaping global projects, and countries like Pakistan or Iran get funding to build ports or pipelines that bypass U.S. allies. Then there's Putin, the 72-year-old Russian leader who's turned the Ukraine war into a grinding stalemate. At the summit, he blamed the West for the conflict, saying Russia's special operation is defensive. 33 But behind the scenes, he's leaning on China for drones and chips, evading U.S. sanctions. Trump's mixed signals on Ukraine, promising a quick deal but criticizing NATO, have confused allies, making Putin's position stronger. U.S. interests in Europe, like supporting Ukraine to contain Russia, are suffering as SCO unity gives Putin diplomatic cover. Losses include higher energy prices for Americans, as Russia's oil flows to China instead of Europe, and a weakened NATO if Trump keeps threatening to pull out. Modi, at 74, is the wildcard. As head of India's 1.4 billion people, he's navigated tricky waters, buying cheap Russian oil despite U.S. pressure, while joining U.S.-led groups against China. But Trump's tariffs on Indian steel and tech have soured things. 25 At the SCO, Modi met Xi to talk borders, hinting at a thaw after 2020 clashes that killed soldiers. 6 He also stressed anti-terror efforts, a nod to Pakistan's role in the group. For the U.S., losing India's full commitment is huge. India was key to the Indo-Pacific strategy against China. Now, with tariffs biting, Indian firms might shift more trade to SCO partners, costing U.S. jobs and alliances. Other leaders add flavor. Iran's Pezeshkian, elected in 2024, is here to escape isolation, seeking oil deals with China amid U.S. sanctions. Central Asian presidents like Kazakhstan's Tokayev want security pacts against unrest. Even observers like Turkey's Erdogan are attending, eyeing closer ties. 9 The summit's outcomes, like the 10-year plan, aim for deeper ties in energy, trade, and culture, areas where the U.S. once led but now risks being sidelined. 32 Trump's policies are the elephant in the room. Since taking office again, he's upended global norms, withdrawing from trade pacts, imposing tariffs that could shrink world GDP by 1%, and even hinting at deals with Putin on Ukraine that ignore allies. 14 His tariff war on China has escalated, with 60% duties on electronics, hurting U.S. farmers and manufacturers who rely on cheap imports. For Russia, sanctions are tougher, but SCO helps dodge them. India, hit with 50% tariffs on exports like pharmaceuticals, sees this as bullying. 18 American interests in free trade and stable alliances are crumbling. Losses include billions in export revenue, as countries diversify away from the dollar, and weaken soft power as the U.S. appears isolationist. Imagine the ripple effects. In Asia, SCO's push for a payment system in local currencies means less need for U.S. banks, eroding the dollar's dominance. 27 Security-wise, joint anti-terror drills could evolve into a counter-NATO, threatening U.S. bases in the region. Economically, America's tech edge slips if SCO shares AI without export controls. Trump's chaos, tweeting threats one day, praising dictators the next, makes the U.S. look weak, pushing neutrals like India toward China. Yet, not all is lost for America. Some experts say the SCO is more show than substance, with internal rifts like India-China tensions holding it back. 29 Modi didn't fully endorse the group's anti-West stance last year, showing India's balancing act. U.S. strengths like innovation and democracy could win back friends if Trump dials down the aggression. But right now, as leaders toast in Tianjin, the message is clear: the world isn't waiting for Washington. This summit wraps up Monday with bilateral talks and a joint photo, symbols of a multipolar world. For everyday Americans, it means higher prices from trade wars, job shifts as companies move overseas, and a riskier globe if alliances fray. Trump's upending of relations might protect short-term interests, but the long-term losses, diminished global leadership, economic isolation, and empowered rivals, could define his legacy. As Xi rolls out the red carpet, the U.S. watches from afar, wondering if it's time to rethink its approach.